Welcome back to La La Land on CRN Digital Talk. That's Steve Julian, and I am Brett Chapin. Right here, we are talking with the very talented Dorothy Dillingham Blue, youth theater director at Theater Palisades, and actress, choreographer, voiceover artist. Dorothy, we were talking a little bit about Theater Palisades, and you work at the youth theater there. Tell us about some of the pluses and some of the challenges about working with young people.
Well, I gotta say, when I'm working with these kids, is that I dare them to just go and make big, bold choices. And what I found working with the youth in comparison to working with adults is, if you are willing to go in there with this energy of it's a free place to fall, it's a free place to mess up, you would be so amazed and surprised and thankful for these choices that these young performers make. They really are willing to act without a net. And then I go sometimes when I work with adults and I'm like, all right, just make those big, bold choices. And they're like, oh, I'm going to part my hair on the other side. I'm like, what? This is not a bold choice. For instance, I worked back-to-back original musicals, and so which meant that these kids were originating a role. They can't go on YouTube and see Kristen Chenoweth, who was a wonderful actress, playing a role, or they can't go on and see someone from a movie do the same role. They have to create a role from page to stage. And I have to say that when you give them the tools to build those characters, then they're only going to give you something freaking amazing. Like when I was doing Wind in the Willows, I actually had the writer in with me all the time, the wonderfully talented Diane Grant. And she was wonderful in answering questions in regards to language. We were doing Wind in the Willows. So I remember my favorite was someone asked what a pickled gherkin was, because there's a lot of talk about food in the show. And so to have her talk about, well, a gherkin is a lovely small pickle, and it's very delicious to eat. And you could see the kids listening to her intently. And the next time pickled gherkin was said on stage, it was the most delicious sounding thing coming from their mouths. You could tell that they were just like, pickled gherkins, and they were just going out there with it. I also find that if you give them a physical reference to what they're doing, to what they need to portray on stage, then they have such a wonderful thing to fall back on and sit on. So I do a lot of animal work, saying, okay, here's this character, and they tend to be a little flighty. They may kind of jump from here to there. Think of an animal that would do something similar to that. So they may think of some sort of bird. And I'm like, okay, but think specifically. Let's go specific. What kind of bird? Well, how about a flamingo? Because a flamingo gets kind of angry and they flap really big, and then they get annoyed and they stand on one foot. I'm like, yes, go with that. And that way you can see them whenever they have a moment where they are a little bit lost. You see them and go like, okay, I'm a flamingo. And so they just, they start flapping their arm like, oh my gosh, they're expressing themselves. But they have that to fall back on. And I think that's a very important thing to do, is to give these kids tools that they can use to build these characters.
Do you have young actors who come to theater as a refuge?
Absolutely. And that's something that I'm very proud of, is that I say, any problems you have in your world, when you walk through the theater door, they're problems that you can release. That this is your safe haven. This is your place to let go of that argument that you have with your brother, to let go of maybe a sadness that you have of a friendship that has gone away. We live in a world where, the divorce rate is really high. And I'm going to get a little emotional. I had a kid come in, and I noticed she was kind of shell-shocked looking. And I said, what's wrong? And she says, I'm so sorry I'm late, but my mom is fighting with my dad. And she couldn't really express herself. And I'm a child of divorce myself. And I said, is it hard when the rules are different at each home? And she said, yes. I don't know what the rules are supposed to be. I don't know when I'm breaking a rule. And she started to get emotional. And I said, you know what? You can cry. Why don't you have a nice, good cry? And so she did. I said, here's this corner. Have some fresh air. You go cry it out, girl. And when you're ready to come back, you come back. And if that's what theater can do, then that's why I'm here.
don't tell me theater doesn't change lives.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
Absolutely. For information on Dorothy, you can visit her website, dorothydillinghamblue.voice123.com. You can also send her an email at Theater Palisades. And thanks so much for coming in, Dorothy,
Hey,
and
no
talking to us.
problem.
We'll be back to talk with Tony Torrisi, Catherine Lydon, and Lara Doucette of the show Rabbit Hole at Theater Palisades. If you have any questions for them, give us a call at 1-800-336-2225. I'm here with the great Steve Julian from KPCC. And we'll be back on La La Land with Brett and Steve on CRN Digital Talk.